welcome to the Conscious Eating Summit. I'm your host, Dr. Nancy Kroll. Today, I am very pleased to have with me KP Khalsa. KP is an herbalist, nutritionist, yoga teacher, and educator. He is an Ayurvedic practitioner and was the apprentice of Ayurvedic master Yogi Bhajan for 32 years. He is also the first person to professionally be certified in Ayurveda and herbalism, and he's the author of numerous books. Thank you, KP, so much for joining me today.
It's always my pleasure. Nice to see you again.
So today, what we're going to be talking about are antimicrobials, and I was just, we were just discussing, how that ties into all of the other things that we've been learning about in this season's summit. And the reason why I really wanted to bring this up is I feel like over and over again, viewers are hearing, this idea that Hashimoto's and other autoimmune conditions, but specifically hypothyroidism, has this tie to silent kind of chronic infections that affect the HPA axis, the adrenals, the thyroid. And so I just wanted to get your take on it from an herbalist point of view. So I guess maybe you could talk about just what your view, first of all, is with the gut microbiome.
Well, as we're finding out increasingly, the gut microbiome is critical for health in every single way. Somewhere around 10 times as many bugs live in our gut as we have actual cells in our body. That number is being kind of debated these days. But anyway, there's a lot of bugs in there. And, you only have about 3 pounds of waste material in your gut. And in there it's just this zoo of maybe 400 different species of bugs, some good, some not so good. We need some of them, and then others are pathological and shouldn't be in there, and they damage the lining of our digestive tract, allowing us then to absorb these foreign materials, which the body thinks is an invader, and we go into the whole autoimmune situation. This whole idea is hinted at in traditional medicine, but not really explored very well. We know that people have to have well-functioning digestive tracts in order to be healthy, but the whole connection between the specific bugs and how they act and how to kill them is very, very new. So I think everybody is still experimenting, and some are using drugs to kill those bugs, and others are using other natural medicines.
So I'm wondering, in your viewpoint, I think a lot of people have this idea that if they want to heal their gut, they can just take some probiotics or and use food. And I really feel that food and probiotics do have a role, but do you feel like there's always like a time and place for the antimicrobials, like kind of going a little bit more hard hitting?
Yeah, very definitely. Unfortunately, the reason most people have pathological bugs in their gut is because they took antibiotics.
Yeah.
So most of us a generation ago were just slathered in antibiotics. I mean, I grew up in the miracle drug era, where it was one drug after another. And anything that even smacked of any kind of an infection, you got a prescription for an antibiotic. So the two things that allow these foreign bugs, these bad bugs, to come in and set up shop are either antibiotics, which just kill everything, and then somebody's going to live in there. So the bad bugs come in, and if they come in first, they set up shop, and now they've carpeted the landscape and fight against the good bugs that are going to come in. It's bacterial wars in your gut. You have 100 to 400 different species. They all want what they want. They all want to conquer territory. And remember, these bugs aren't sort of floating free, swimming in our digestive waste. They find a way to the lining of the gut, and then they attach there and make a carpet of the entire, our 40-foot long intestinal tract. They're not supposed to be in the small intestine, but when we wipe out everything that was there from the beginning, they set up shop, and then the good bugs don't have a place to live. The other thing that can wipe them out is some kind of very serious diarrheal disease. I mean, if you had cholera or something like that just for days washed out all your bugs, then you have to start with the good ones as well. So I completely agree that probiotics are necessary, and food has the benefit of, if you eat the right foods, the foods that you eat then are not going to exacerbate the situation, but do they really heal it? Well, to a certain extent, but somehow we have to get those bugs out of there. And one solution, of course, is to use drugs again, which kind of recreates the whole problem. But if you do it carefully, maybe that would work. I prefer using natural medicines, and they seem to work pretty well.
Yeah. You just mentioned bacteria in the small intestine, which for those of you that aren't familiar, you might see the word SIBO, SIBO, kind of lurking around, which can be a side a side symptom of thyroid conditions as well. And I do see a lot of practitioners still prescribing antibiotics for SIBO. In your experience, what sort of herbs do you feel are the most effective when you're trying to rebalance the gut microbiome?
Yeah, it's a very challenging question because we have to know what kind of bugs are in there. And the only way we can really do that is with a stool test. Those are kind of expensive, but not a bad idea to get your stool tested and figure out which species are in there. Over time, the price has come down and is coming down. So not a bad idea. The problem with using anything to kill the bad bugs, whether it's antibiotics or natural medicines, is that you have to know when you're finished, did you accomplish the objective? So if a person takes antibiotics for a month and they feel better and everything is okay, then probably it worked out. But the problem is if you leave any of these bad bugs in there, again, it's civil war in there between these bugs. And so if you leave a preponderance of good bugs, they'll carpet the territory and take over, and the bad bugs don't have anywhere to live. But ultimately, you have to do a stool test then at the end of the treatment to make sure you got them. If you didn't get them, you have to do it again, maybe do another stool test. So it's either just sort of your best clinical expertise and guesswork, or doing a bunch of stool tests. So what do we use? Well, berberine-containing herbs are likely to work quite well. Let me go back for a second and just say that there's debate about which of these bugs actually kill bad bugs and how many of them kill good bugs. We know that most antibiotics will just kill everything. We don't want that. The question is, will these natural remedies kill the bad bugs only and leave the good bugs alone? Well, we don't really know because they haven't been studied. But in my experience, likely to work pretty well and not create more dysbiosis. They don't act like antibiotics. They act in a way that is preferential to killing the bad bugs. So these berberine-containing herbs. Berberine is a chemical that occurs in many different herbal medicines around the world. And it's quite antimicrobial just in general. It kills a wide variety of pests, yeast and other type of fungi, plus bacteria. So many of these herbs that are available contain it. Golden seal would be an example. That's been my kind of go-to for many, many years for this situation, and it's well known for infections in the gut. It comes directly into contact with the bugs because they're right in the digestive tube. You swallow it, it goes there, it poisons them. Now, berberine that's been extracted from these plants, berberine is yellow, so most of these roots are yellow, is available. And we can use that. And I've increasingly been switching over to that just because you have to take a lot less of it. It's not as broad spectrum. It probably doesn't work quite as well in every case as something like the golden seal, but it's a lot less expensive and much more potent. It's essentially the active ingredient. So you can take a few capsules, maybe 10 grams for a few days to get rid of those bugs, something like that. It'd be very difficult to take 10 grams of berberine in the form of a whole herb because it's only a small proportion. You have to take a large amount. So berberine definitely is something to consider, and or the herbs that contain berberine, which would be, again, largely golden seal, but also Oregon grape, coptis. There are a few examples, barberry.
So I have a question. I see in a lot of the formulas oil of oregano, and I've heard mixed things about oil of oregano, that it actually, when taken as a single herb, can be very similar in its function as antibiotics in terms of it wiping out your system. Do you have any experience around that?
I have a generally positive experience or impression of oil of oregano, but I've used it very little in clinical practice, and I'm not sure. But you're right, that is the debate, and that's one of the things that sort of kept me away from using it. The problem is we just don't have tests for any of these things, and it would be expensive and time-consuming to do these tests. Hopefully, eventually, we'll get them done. But, there are hundreds of types of bacteria, thousands really, that live on our body and in our body. And we'd have to test every single one. So it's just a huge job, and we'll see where that goes. I think people can use oil of oregano and then probably follow it up by very large doses of probiotics. Probably going to work okay.
Yeah. The other question I had for you is that I feel like most of my trainings in functional medicine around the gut, as a lot of the dietary protocols around that tend to be more on the like paleo side, and I wanted to find out your opinion from an Ayurvedic standpoint of, is it possible to still eat grains and legumes and essentially starve off some of these bad bacteria?
Yeah, I think probably so. The question is, these bacteria, some of them live on carbohydrates, although that's really more yeast. That's the problem. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges with Ayurveda is that the core texts were written 3,000 years ago. And even though people had the same bodies, they had very different lifestyle. So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have antibiotics. And maybe they had cholera and survived, something like that, a diarrheal disease, but they didn't have antibiotics. And so we didn't have this mass SIBO problem that we have created today. They also didn't have refined grains, which is another matter. So when we talk about grains and legumes, most people are eating white bread and white refined products of one kind or another, and those are not good for this situation. Could you use modest amounts of whole grains? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you have to be full-blown paleo to cure this problem. This is a modern issue, and again, these traditional systems, whether you're looking at any of the big three, Ayurveda, Chinese, or Western, don't really have traditional teachings on this idea because, again, it's pretty new. So
Mm-hmm.
we only have indirect kind of indications. People also in traditional lives in India did a lot more exercise. So they were breathing clean air, drinking clean water, and hauling buckets of water up and down from the creek to their house all day long, or working in the lentil fields. And we don't do that today. We sit at a desk, like I am right now, and tap on a computer.
Yeah.
So it's hard to draw the comparison.
Yeah, it's true. I know. I just read an article about the connection between the gut microbiome and vitamin D deficiency. So the impact, of us not getting the sunlight that we used to get, and how much that influences the diversity in our gut.
Well,
Yeah.
without a doubt, vitamin D has just been revolutionary for me in terms of my practice, and it really has nothing to do with Ayurveda per se. It's a new idea, naturopathic functional medicine, this idea that everybody's vitamin D deficient, but that covers a lot of territory. So when you bring people up to vitamin D sufficiency, a lot of things kind of solve themselves. It was a
Mm-hmm.
major factor that we didn't consider until about 10 years ago, or even 2 or 5 years ago, but it's huge. That vitamin D doesn't kill bacteria directly, but it just helps your body work so much better in every way, and then your immune system functions properly. Your immune system is what's supposed to keep these things in check. And
Mm-hmm.
you eat bad bugs with every bite of food. The question is, do they survive the trip through your gut, and then are they allowed to live there without your immune system gobbling them up?
Yeah, I guess that kind of takes us to the next topic, which could be stomach acidity. So low stomach acid is a big culprit for having some of these problems. What do you use to help increase stomach acidity?
You know, Here's the problem. If you want to heal something, you have to heal everything. And all the big
Mm,
three natural healing systems are focused on that. And we have this challenge now in our culture that we have a drug-oriented mindset where people expect to use natural medicine, like a drug, instead of using, whatever drug it may be, choose a natural form of that. It really just doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work very well when you take that approach. Nonetheless, that's kind of what we're stuck with. So I usually use just hydrochloric acid supplementation,
mm,
and that's a big problem, the hydrochloric acid insufficiency. The problem we're finding now with our population is that there's so much broad spectrum subclinical nutritional deficiency. Almost everybody is slightly deficient in almost every necessary nutrient, vitamin D notwithstanding, but numerous other of these things, that everything just sort of still works. You can sort of digest food. You don't have an overt disease. You don't have beriberi or pellagra, but you do
mm,
have a subclinical deficiency of these things. And many of these nutrients are involved in a long chain of cause and effect that if you don't have it, magnesium or various B vitamins or whatever it may be, the chain just sort of starts to fall apart. And all these weak links mean that you don't get good enzymatic action in all of your tissues. So producing hydrochloric acid in your gut is not simple. It's a long process of many, many things happening to get to the place where those specialized cells can secrete the hydrochloric acid. There's really not much you can do to sort of push a button and using natural medicine make your body produce a bunch of hydrochloric acid. It does go up eventually as people become healthier, but temporarily probably just using hydrochloric acid supplementation, and then we can use other digestive herbal remedies that we know will sort of give a temporary punch to that.
Yeah. Um, it's kind I was just thinking about, as you were talking about how things have, all these are kind of modern problems and how things have been changing. It's like all the things that we actually should be doing for health are not trendy or sexy. Like they're not, we really just need to be like outside, growing our own food, resting, all of these things that when you tell a client or a patient this, they're like, that's so simple, right? Yet they won't do it because it's boring and it's not fast and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do within modern culture. But I think that when we get to the root of all these problems, the more that we could be more like, our traditional ancestors, I think that would probably resolve a lot of this stuff.
Well, to be frank, people have been told by their medical doctors their entire life that those things bear no importance in your health. Diet has no effect. Doesn't matter how long you sleep. It doesn't matter how much stress you have. And if you're stressed, take a Xanax, whatever. So this drug-oriented mindset has been around for a long time, and people have swallowed that, whether they realize it or not. And so they want the magic, give me the natural pill that's going to pump up my hydrochloric acid or kill the bugs or, do whatever. Your immune system is supposed to kill the bugs, but your immune system is horrendously complex and requires all these things. It requires sleep and less stress and all these various nutrients. So it just so happens that hydrochloric acid is something that's just ridiculously complicated. If you follow the biochemistry all the way back, it's just never ending. I mean, you have to have everything to get something in that case. Fortunately, the supplements are available and we can temporarily bump that up so that at least the bugs that you're eating in your spoonful of food they're supposed to die when they get immersed in that acid bath, and they're not supposed to make it to your small intestine. So we can use that temporarily, and then overall digestive aids and all these other things you were mentioning, lifestyle.
Yeah. So if there was a viewer watching and maybe they had either Hashimoto's or some gas and bloating, what's like one thing that you feel they could start doing right now to improve their health?
Warming digestive aids. Those would be mainly tropical spices, but there are some things from Western herbalism around the Mediterranean. Thyme, you mentioned oregano. I mean, that's a warming digestive aid. Marjoram, that whole family of warming remedies that they can take. Otherwise, they're going to be tropical things like ginger and cinnamon and clove. Using enough of those to increase what Ayurveda would call digestive fire, or just the sum total of all the digestive energies, secretions into the gut. Those make a huge difference. Now, they take a long time to work. If people are having gas, they might find that the gas responds pretty quickly. But in terms of all the other things, the nutrients that you require are supposed to come from your food, but you have to absorb them. And that's why we're talking about this in this summit. So it takes a long time for those things to do the job, have the nutrients be absorbed, bring those nutrients back up to the reserve capacity, fill in your tanks that you need to be able to give your immune system what it needs to be able to fight the bad bugs. It's so all interconnected.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good message for everyone to hear, that natural healing is not overnight. Sometimes you have that odd response where things are magically better after one dosage or something like that. But in general, if you're going to be addressing the root cause, it does take time. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what you have a free gift for our viewers. Do you mind sharing what that is?
Yeah, it's a free webinar on Healthy Weight, Healthy You, and we're going to talk for 90 minutes about things that you can do to facilitate just the kinds of things we're talking about, good digestion and like that, but other things that help adjust your metabolism so that you can burn fat a little faster and maybe reduce your appetite and things like that. Anyway, it's well worth watching, so my gift to you.
And just everyone, so you know, the link for this free gift is below this video, and it's also in the email where you found the interview. So I have one last question for you, KP. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
Well, boy, younger self. I'm tempted to say pick a different career because I've been doing this for almost 50 years, incredibly challenging. Just the fact we had this conversation, we're still grinding through the same issues that we did with people 50 years ago. You can't eat crap. You can't just, not sleep endlessly. You can't manage stress. And now my generation, the baby boomers, are realizing that, oops, they didn't do all that. and now they're suffering the same issues as their parents did, and they come back and want the drug solution. I'm just about picking another career, but it's just over and over and over with having to preach to the choir with these same things. I was really lucky in the fact that when I was a teenager, I tuned into these kinds of ideas. It was a hippie time, and we started eating tofu, for example, of all things, so, and started taking herbs and vitamins, and it stood me very, very, very well over my adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe you'd say like actually start implementing some of these changes now, right? Rather than wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't wait until
Mhm.
you have a heart bypass to start going to heart rehab. Start, taking care of your heart when you're 20.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, KP, for sharing all of your knowledge around herbs. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, thanks for having me. Nice to see you again.
And thank you all for joining me today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for our next episode. Bye.